Podcast, episode 6.
6.
All right, 6 in. 6 deep. We're like, it's like 12 hours of podcasting. It's pretty cool.
It's a lot of talking.
We're probably going to start every single podcast talking about how crazy it is that we're still doing this, but here we are. Josh, what's new?
Same old, same old.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Got a little LaCroix there?
Yes. This is the watermelon, or
Pastique.
I guess that's French for watermelon? I don't know.
I'd assume so. Good stuff. We got our beverages. We got LaCroix. We got coffee. We got water. My cup is freshly filled. What's been new? What have you been up to?
Same thing. I mean, working with Cloak and Dagger a lot.
Saw that new video you put out. Was that
Yeah.
the one you were leaving to film after this?
Yeah.
Nice.
Actually, yeah.
That looked pretty cool.
Thank you.
Are they trying to do more stuff like that?
Yeah, there's trying to be more of a balance, kind of break up the monotony of photos and kind of get everyone involved, because everyone there has a part in making the cocktails for the new menus and stuff. So just trying to showcase everybody there.
Yeah.
That they all have their own talents.
I really liked that. I thought that it was they kind of went like halfway between just like showing like a bartender working and stuff and actually showing like an instructional kind of like video on how to make one of those cocktails. I don't know if they did that on purpose or not, if they didn't want to get too specific with like how they make it, but
yeah, we just wanted to keep it more entertaining, I guess, you know. It's just like a little short montage of like, hey, like this simple ingredients, but you know, this is how we create it.
Yeah, that's super cool. So how do you feel about, like, let's take like restaurants or bars in this case or anything like that. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about them putting out actual detailed instructional content on like how they make certain things? Like, let's say, for example, like, you know how you can go on YouTube and find like this is how to make chicken Alfredo or something like that. Yeah. And it's kind of like an actual, like, here's the recipe, here's how we do it and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. What's your opinion on that from like a restaurant or bar standpoint? Like if they put in like, this is the exact measurements of the liquids and stuff that we use and the alcohols and stuff. Yeah,
I think it's cool. I don't think it detracts people from coming to your location. It's not like they're going to go out and buy every single bottle of alcohol or ingredient to make that. But I think it kind of shows a nice transparency for you to your customer that, hey, this is our simple ingredients. This is all that's in it. This is what we do to make your favorite cocktail. Yeah. And I think it brings a lot of interest too, to like, wow, that's all that it took to make this wonderful beverage or food. Because I would like to, because their chef Todd, does completely plant-based. Yep. And it's amazing. You could literally eat a cheesesteak there, and you would have no idea that it was plant-based.
I remember Corey, when he was first getting ready to open the place, I stopped up there for something. I don't remember what. And he let me try like a mac and cheese or something that they were making there. I've been to Cloak and Dagger now 2 or 3 times, and I've never actually eaten there, but I remember he let me try that and told me, you know, it was vegan and everything. And I think it was like a mac and cheese with some sort of like protein in it or whatever. Yeah. And it was so fucking good.
Yeah. And I think that would be the next thing I'd like to do, is to showcase that, especially because it's something not a lot of places are doing. You know, they'll have some vegan options, but they're fully committed to it, you know. And I think he's done the best job for me personally as a meat eater, you know, that I could never tell the difference. Yeah. And I think that's a very exciting thing that we need to showcase more.
I agree. I was just thinking that as you were talking, is I guess I don't really see a whole lot of emphasis on the food, like on their social media channel.
Yeah, they've done a few posts. You know, they try to show it more, but I think they've just been so, you know, it's first and foremost a cocktail lounge. Yeah. So I think that is the forefront. You have to show a lot of that, but I think in the next coming months or so, we're going to definitely, they're going to be starting a new menu for their spring cocktail menu and stuff. So hopefully we can get some good stuff of him as well. Other than that, I went over to the Rally Inn.
Oh, yeah.
That place,
how was that?
Oh, it's torn apart. They're redoing the entire, just the bar. Yeah. So the guy was like showing me it was like this much grime that they chunked off because that's I guess
those
that's
old bars probably get so disgusting.
Yeah, so I mean, I think he said it was built in 1887.
Holy shit! I know a lot of those houses are really old.
Yeah,
I almost bought a house that was like a block away from there.
Yeah,
that I'm pretty sure it was made in like 1910.
Yeah, he said it was the second bar in Cleveland.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, and that's all like those bar tops are the original bar tops. So all they're doing is sanding it down and then refinishing it because they want obviously keep that. It's like historical basically at this point.
Yeah.
But it's going to look really nice. Like they're going to take it more from like the weird little dark dive bar and kind of sprucing it up a little bit. So
that's cool.
Yeah. They have a 2-week window on that. So hopefully.
Oh, that's a short period of time.
Yeah, they give them like a really, really small window. They're like, we have to get this done soon, fast, so we can open back up. Because I'm sure, with COVID and everything, it's just been kind of hard to save
shutting
money.
down for 2 weeks has got to be pretty tricky in a situation like that.
Yeah, exactly. So,
that's awesome, though.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see it, honestly. And it's just, I didn't know that there was that much history and heritage with the rally-in,
Yeah,
I mean,
dude.
and it's right across the street from the Christmas Story house, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like, it's so weird. It's like just such a important part of Cleveland that's just like tucked away on this little side street.
Well, because when you think of Tremont, you don't think of that, even though it technically still is.
Yeah.
Right? So to give people context, we are talking about 2 different bar/restaurants in Cleveland. The first one is Cloak and Dagger. They are right on 11th across from Lincoln Park. Cloak and Dagger is a kind of a high-end cocktail bar / vegan small plates restaurant. Right.
Yep.
It's new. They just opened during a pandemic, which, listen, good for them. Right?
Yeah.
Corey, the owner, is a client of ours and also a friend. We've known him for quite a long time. And him, as well as a girl, Casey Hughes, recently opened the place. And they've been killing it, man. I mean, it's really cool to see. I think I talked to Corey recently. He said, like, their last couple months just keep getting busier and busier. They keep beating out their last month, which is fantastic given the climate of things.
Yeah, and they were really worried because they had a COVID issue with one of their hosts, I think, and they had to shut down for a week and get everything sanitized and everything. And they were kind of worried when they opened back up, like, people are going to be scared, but they've been completely booked. I guess their last 3 weekends have been you can't even get in.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then they, I think they just got the permission to break ground on a patio area out front.
It's going to be out front.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Out under that tree.
Yeah,
so, I think that's the first real patio that's been in that area.
Yeah,
for a long time.
Recall one.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful area, right? I mean, looking
really
at the
is.
park and stuff like that, that is perfect. That's why I love going to Civilization right across the street, the coffee shop, is because it's just a nice view. Like, things going on around you.
Yeah, so it's pretty good. I think it's really good for the Tremont area.
Yep.
They kind of fit the aesthetic of the that part of the town too. Mm-hmm. So
especially, what I wasn't thinking about until somewhat recently is with Spotted Owl still being closed. Like,
oh yeah,
so Spotted Owl is another really high end cocktail bar in Tremont, and it's a niche kind of thing, right? Like, not everybody wants to go out and have $12 cocktails that are all fancy and sit around it and drink them and stuff like that. It sometimes can be more of a special occasion thing, or it fits that kind of like bougie Tremont vibe, right?
Yeah,
and the Spotted Owl was one of the most popular ones, I would say, in the Cleveland area. Like,
Definitely.
they really made a name for themselves of being fancy,
oh,
right?
Yeah.
And I could totally see how with they've been closed since COVID. They haven't wanted to reopen back up. They've had a lot of strong kind of public opinions on that. Them, as well as their other partners and 2 other bars, have stayed closed this entire time. So I think that's opened up a really good opportunity for Cloak and Dagger. We talked about this, right? Like, there, whether good, bad, or in between, there is opportunity out there just due to all of the changes and everything happening. So good for them. I'm super happy for them. Like I said, we went there. Kate and I got married 2 weeks ago, and we did our little post marriage party at Cloak and Dagger. And it was so much fun. It's a really, really awesome place. So back to the conversation though about putting out the actual recipe and stuff. And you were saying you don't have a problem with that. You don't think that's going to deter people from coming in and looking at those things or getting those things and stuff like that. I think that puts a lot of emphasis on. It's not necessarily just the food or the cocktail that's bringing you to these places, right? Yeah. It's that community that you're creating, and it's that environment you're creating. Like you were saying, there's only 3 or 4 ingredients in some of these cocktails, and anybody can go home and make those things, right? But it's the presentation. It's how they put it together. It's how they bring it out to you, which I think is so cool. And this gets equated to dog training really, really easily, where I have people ask me all the time, just based on how much social media content we put out there, and them saying things like, well, how do you I remember one time I was sitting down with a trainer in Chicago. I used to do a lot of like little weekend runs out there, and I was sitting down with this dude, and he was asking me, he's kind of a newer trainer, wasn't really super involved on social media and stuff, and he's like, how do you put out such good content while still like holding back the important details or whatever, I told him, I was like, I don't hold back the important details, right? If there is a secret that I have, that's like, this is the key to how we work through dog reactivity or leash walking or whatever it may be, I'm going to put that out there. I'm going to provide that as something that people can take and ingest and learn, because nothing frustrates me more than when I go to try to watch an instructional video on anything, right? It could be dog training. It could be a fucking recipe. It could be, how do I change the light fixture in my bedroom? It could be any of those things. And you know this already. When you get into YouTube and you start watching some of these videos and you get 5 minutes into the video and you could just tell you're going to try to sell me something after this. Yeah. Right? You're going to hold back just that little important detail that you're going to make me go to some sort of thing to pay for to get that information from. Nothing drives me crazier than that. Yeah, you look like an idiot. Like yes. You're money hungry. It's ridiculous, right? And not only that, but like the goal through all this content is to help people, right? And if you're holding back certain pieces of information, it's not helping people then, right? No. I love when I get messages from people that say, hey, I've been able to train my dog or do this, or this, utilizing your videos that you have out there, right? That is such an awesome feeling, and we get it all the time. And here's the other side of the equation. No matter what, there's always going to be some nuance to those things, whether it's the cocktail and just, how they know how to do whatever to spice it up just a little bit with those ingredients, where you can't write that information out or really explain it very effectively. Yeah. Or in dog training, how do you adjust when you notice this issue or whatever it may be, where it's, again, not something you could write out every example of for. Those people then, because you've been so transparent with them, they're going to reach out to you, and they're actually going to utilize your services then to kind of help finish off those things as they're having issues with them, right? Yeah. Or, if you're not able to get that presentation just right or whatever it may be, like, you're still going to want to go there for the atmosphere and for the experience and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, that conversation always drives me crazy, of people wanting to like hold certain things back. It's just, I just don't see how it's necessary at all. I don't know. Yeah. Well, I mean, the 2.5 or 3 years of videos that we've done in the past, I mean, there was never anything left behind. No. I mean, there's no way to, because all those years of putting out information, I mean, there's no way to hide anything anyway. And that was never an intention anyway. It was just always, okay, this is exactly how you do it. Yeah. When we would go, here, this is the first way to get your dog to heal. Yeah. And if there were issues, like, I remember being like, hey, keep that issue in there. like, oh, wow, this dog isn't picking it up just right. Like, leave that clip in so people can see how we work through that thing. Because that's the important stuff, man. And I got a bunch of, I put out a post this morning just looking for any sort of topics people want to discuss, questions, stuff like that. And a handful of the questions on here correlate directly to that, right? They correlate directly to, well, how do you equate this stuff at home, right? How do you, what's the deal with all of these things that I see other trainers posting to do, and why are they effective or not effective, and this and that? And the problem is, when you're always only doing a before and an after, or just an after, or whatever it may be, you're not seeing that messy middle in between. Yeah. And that's where I see people struggle. I did a send home lesson the other day with a dog, and I always tell my send home lessons that I do, I hate when the dogs do perfect in the send home lesson, because you don't get to see how to work through the problems, because no matter what, when you go home, you're going to have problems, and you're going to have to know how to communicate through those problems. That's true. That is a good philosophy, because
when you see some of these, I'm sure there's a lot of trainers that do cut that stuff out.
Yeah,
so it's
sure.
like, oh, look, I'm perfect. Like
Yeah.
this, I made this dog completely perfect. There was no trouble along the way, you know. But that is an unrealistic expectation to have
For sure.
For anything, honestly. I mean, video, photos, dogs, whatever. I mean, you have to walk the walk. There's going to be times where you mess up.
Yep.
You know, that things aren't going to be as good as you thought, but you just keep doing it. I mean, that's like a thing for life.
Yeah. You know, how to work through the issues,
Yeah.
right? Life doesn't happen without issues, right? You don't not run into hiccups or roadblocks or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And if you don't have those, you know, from the super broad standpoint now, if you don't have those like internal tools to be able to work through those issues and those stresses that happen in day-to-day life, like you're lost. You know, like what are you going to do? You can't do anything, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that stuff is super important.
Yeah, it's how you persevere over it. You know, what are the steps you're going to take to correct it or make it better?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Good stuff.
Man, we got deep in the first conversation.
What else? You got any new jobs lined up here that you're getting on? Did you reach out to Mabel's yet?
I did reach out to Mabel's. They have not responded yet.
Mabel's, get at this man.
Please. I am here to do work.
I'm here to take your photos.
Yes, please.
Nice.
Yeah, other than that, it's been a good week, and I'm hoping this week will end up strongly, and maybe we'll get
Strongly.
Bigly
strongly.
strongly. We don't have perfect grammar on this podcast sometimes.
That's okay. I don't know how to talk. I don't know how to read. Cool. Yeah. Things have been.
We're glad you're here, even though we can't function.
It's whatever. Cool. So, yeah.
So you said you got some questions, though, huh?
We got all sorts of stuff here. So
I'm excited.
So last time the podcast was the random one officially, I feel like. I think we officially had the random podcast. Yes. We discussed the dog button pushing phenomena. And here's the thing. You know what? I left that last podcast thinking, man, did we dwell on that a little too long? Did we talk about it too much? I had so many people reach out to me after that last one that were like, you know what? I've been trying to like screw around with these buttons, or I've been watching this girl. I guess that like Hunger or what, the girl's name is Hunger or whatever. I guess like she's like a really big deal on Instagram right now, and
really?
A lot of people follow her, and she's the one who kind of started this trend. And I had a bunch of people reach out to me that were like, "Wow, I didn't really get this." Right?
Yeah.
And I had one person. Okay, so Courtney Ponch. Did you know Ponchki? Did you know Ponchki? I feel like you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The
So
dog Punchki.
Yes. not the.
I was like, is that her last?
Yeah. So there's this dog that we train. Her name is Ponchki, and her owner Courtney. So she was actually messaging me after that last one came out, and she was kind of, you know, like I don't want to say like questioning some of the things, but like she was asking a little bit more additional questions, because she had played around with this stuff with her dog Ponchki a little bit, right? She had gotten 3 different buttons. I think she said they were specifically for a toy, water, so refilling the water bowl, and what was the other one? I don't remember if it was like food, or I could probably find this in half a second here. I want to make sure I get this right.
Yeah.
Courtney, here we go. Here we go.
It's funny how these fads come so quickly and just get so many people involved from these TikToks.
Water, going outside, and a toy, right? And she was basically just like, you know, like, well, I kind of played around with them, and, you know, Ponchki showed a pretty clear understanding of what those individual buttons were, so, you know, what's going on kind of thing, right? And at first, I was just kind of like, you know, I was under the assumption that she had, you know, a typical kind of 3-button board, and she would go and press the individual ones as needed, right? So I at first, I was just kind of like in my head, like, really? Like, I don't know if she necessarily had a good understanding of that. Like we talked about last night, I don't see how the dogs can really have a clear understanding of it.
Yeah.
Turns out what she wound up doing was she had 3 individual buttons, and she had them strategically placed throughout the house near the certain things, right? So she had a button that was in front of the toy bin, right? Okay. She had a button that was in front of the water bowl, and she had a button that was next to the door to go outside, right? Of course your dog can pick that up. That one is easy. Like I told her, I was like, you're 100% correct, and I 100% believe you that she had a good understanding of that because like we talked about last time, the key factor to why the actual board that's got like a gazillion fucking buttons on it doesn't work is because there's nothing distinguishing any of those buttons, right? The sound that comes after the button would be meaningless because in order for a sound to predict something, it has to come first, not after you push the button. The sound in that case would be for you. She pushes the button, it says, hey, water, I want water, right? And on those boards, there's nothing that distinguishes the difference. The dog can't figure out patterns of a bunch of the same buttons on a board and know which one is which, right? And they obviously can't read, so you can't label them or anything. so that wouldn't work. In this case, having a button in front of a specific thing clearly activates that specific thing, so that's a very easy thing for the dogs to pick up on. So whatever, not dwelling into this again right now, but I felt a little bit like, man, did we talk about that too much? But it wound up being kind of a hit, I guess.
Yeah.
So
that's good.
So that worked out cool. Yeah. And then we ended the last one talking about kind of finishing off one more passage of the Caesar books. Like I said, I have I think 5 or 6 different books that he wrote that I think are all great that we'll dive into at some point. We still want to finish, obviously, Caesar's Way with Emily and Krista at some point. We'll get into that. But we're going to start to transition out of that a little bit because I think the reason why we started with him is because he, in my opinion, pioneered a lot of the philosophies of the way that we train dogs right now, the way that I personally look at training dogs, and the way I personally look at finding that balance between training and obedience. So what we're going to do today is we're going to dive into somebody a little bit more modern with that stuff. Sean O'Shea with The Good Dog. He has a book that he released a couple of years ago. I want to say it was maybe 3-4 years ago. And Sean is a much more modern trainer that used to work with Caesar a little bit and has training styles that are somewhat similar to what we do. And I think that one thing that Sean does a really, really fantastic job with is he breaks down information from the emotional kind of how are you screwing up your dog, how do you need to be around your dog and stuff like that. I think that he breaks that stuff down in a really great way. He's a fantastic writer, and he comes up with really awesome ways to kind of put these things out. So we're going to dive into that a little bit, and then we obviously also have the questions and stuff here as well. What should we do first, Josh? What do you think?
I don't know. Which one do you feel is like a smoother transition?
That's what I'm thinking. I didn't properly think this one out. What do you think?
I feel like the questions.
I would agree.
Okay,
so we're going to dive into some questions here first. So we haven't really done a whole Q&A in a while here. And we got a decent amount of them. So I'm going to try to burn through as many of these as possible. I want to try to get as detailed as possible with it, where it's not going to be just, flash answers where it's the most generic stuff. And I'll see if I could take these questions and correlate them into finding balance and, appropriately living with your dogs and stuff like that. So, you about to hit re-record there?
I'm about to.
Awesome. we got these cameras here. We got to change every 30 minutes. They stop recording. All right. So first question here. This is from Margaret Kelly. Margaret asks, how to properly socialize new puppies and when you start formal training. So general question here. You have the socialization side of things and you have the training side of things. So anytime you get a new puppy, there are 2 major things that you want to do, right? You want to make sure that they're properly socialized with dogs, with people, with things like that. You want to make sure that they are, able to be in different environments and not be super skittish and stuff like that. And then you have the training side of the equation, which is, do you start teaching this dog how to listen to commands, respond to commands, take direction, understand rules, boundaries, and consequences, things like that. So starting off here with when do we start formal training? You have to define formal training, right? So if you're talking formal training, like I'm taking my dog in for classes and I'm actually sitting down and doing a lot of concrete, teaching of things and stuff like that. Typically speaking, for one-on-one courses, we'll start at about 14 weeks with the dog. Board and train programs will start at about 5.5 months. I usually push people that have puppies to starting the one-on-ones as opposed to waiting for the board and train, because I think that period of 14 weeks to 5.5 months, there's a lot of learning that can take place. The reason why we can't do board and trains with younger dogs is because, obviously, if they're 14 weeks old, that's, 3.5 months? That's not very old. So by the end of that board and train, they're going to be 4.5 months old. That is still an infant dog. And there's no way you're going to teach them everything that they need to know in that period of time and have them be essentially trained by the end of the program. And personally, I hate the idea that you're going to have to do one training program. Say you sent your dog to a training program, a board and train with us when they were that young, and then 4 months later you have to send them to another training program. I think that's stupid, right? I want to knock it all out in one go if we're going to do it. And one-on-ones allots us the time where over 10 weeks, or typically it winds up being about 12 weeks, because a couple of those sessions we usually recommend spacing out 2 weeks as opposed to a week. We're able to get all of the points across, and we're able to end in a spot where the dog is proofed with all of those training. So as far as formal training, that's typically the age that I'll recommend actually like teaching obedience commands and introducing some of your training tools like prong collars and e-collars and stuff like that. As far as training in general, though, you got to keep in mind training starts the second that you get the dog home, right? The second I get a new puppy into the house, the first things I'm going to be doing is day one, introducing the crate, right? Making sure the dog is following a strict 2-hour on, 2-hour off schedule where they're in the crate 2 hours, they're out of the crate 2 hours. They're in the crate 2 hours, they're out of the crate 2 hours. And just kind of getting them used to that. That's training, right? That's crate training right there. I'm going to be starting to set boundaries by having the dog, anytime it's loose in the house, dragging a leash around, so I could start to teach them when they jump on something, I could pop them off of it with it. When they start trying to chew at furniture, I could direct them away from it utilizing that leash. If they try to go into a room I don't want them to go into, I could use that leash to set a boundary. And none of this is formal consequences yet, but we're shaping the expectation. And this is where a lot of people get lost, because if they don't do these things early on, what happens is the dog learns as a puppy from 8 weeks to 14 weeks or whatever, that they can go off and do all of these different things. And I can go check out this room and explore this. And I'm always in mom's lap, even though I'm going to be 100 pounds later. And they're carrying me around and up and down stairs and stuff like that. And it winds up being a huge mess, right? So introducing those things early on, if the dog realizes from the second they get in the house, every time they try to walk into another room, we're going to stop them, you might not ever need to add a formal consequence into that, because they're just going to get the ropes, right? They're just going to understand what we want and what we don't want. And then later on, if they're proofing or if they're really pushy with those types of things, we could add those consequences in, right? So, that's the kind of the training side of things, right? Taking them in and outside to go to the bathroom and stuff, making sure they're supervised all the time so they're never having accidents in the house. All of these things are going to set you up for so much success. It's ridiculous that like how much you can get accomplished with a dog that young from a training standpoint, even though it's not training like we think, right? Now you have the socialization side of things. How do we properly socialize a lot of these puppies? Well, first thing you need to factor in is vaccinations, obviously. Until the dog is fully vaccinated, it's typically not a good idea to get them around all sorts of other dogs yet, or really take them out and about a whole lot. Now, I think some people take that to the extreme, and they wait until the dog has had everything and cleared by everything, and it's like, 4 months, 5 months before they ever take the dog like out of the house and stuff. I think that can get a little excessive, but you could take the dog to a handful of different environments and start to get them used to these. So you have 3 different things that we need to socialize the dogs with, right? You have people, you have dogs or animals, and then you have environments, right? Starting with people here, right? We need to make sure that the dog is getting used to being around a lot of different people, but in my opinion, it should be done in a calm way. So, instead of having everybody pick up your dog and smother them with hugs and kisses and this and that, they should be getting used to being around people and being able to walk around and understanding what the boundaries are with people. So my emphasis initially should be, hey, instead of, this love fest going on every time somebody comes over my house to see my puppy, I'm going to just have people come over and I'm just going to correct the dog every time they jump on them, right? And I'm going to make sure they're learning that, hey, these people, you can't just do whatever you want with them. You have to have some respect. And then any interaction that's going to be given is going to be given then in a way where the dog is being calm and compliant, and then we're interacting with them. I'm never going to be holding a puppy and having people come up to them constantly and pet them. I'm never going to go for a walk and have everybody come up to them and pet them and stuff like that for numerous reasons. We've talked a lot about that. But I'm going to make sure that they're getting used to being around new people in a very calm way. If I have access to kids and stuff like that, I'm going to make sure that my dog is getting used to being around children and stuff from an early age. I'm going to be making sure the dog is getting used to being around all sorts of different types of people, tall, short, male, female, black, white, anything, because a lot of those different pictures are different to dogs, right? So that's going to be one big thing that we're going to be doing right off the rip is introductions to people, right? As far as animals, This one, I think people overdo a little bit. They think I get a young dog, I need to do two things. One, go to the dog park and let it run around and play with every other dog out there. And two, I need to go to the pet store and have it introduce to every single dog that we see out and about, right? Both of those things, take off the table, push it to the side, right? We want our dog to have good social skills with other dogs, but we have to be doing it in a very controlled way. And I always say less is more. I want to do less socialization with other dogs, but have it be only positive, appropriate situations than a ton of socialization with other dogs and the dog never really learning to establish a relationship with other dogs. Instead, just being thrown in of like, here's a quick introduction, here's a quick introduction, here's a quick introduction, but I'm never actually learning, what do I do with all of these emotions? How do I communicate and interact with this dog and stuff? So find like, I don't know, 4 or 5 dogs that you can get your dog around semi-regularly and allow them to develop a long-term relationship with. From there, if you want to continue doing socialization long-term with them, you can, get involved in a structured doggy daycare or something like that once the dog is old enough for it. But same deal, less is more. Don't do a ton of this stuff. And never out on the walk with dogs or people. This should always be done in situations where the dog is off leash and able to run around freely and express themselves freely. That way there's no frustration or buildup or anything like that.
Do you feel like that's a big misconception for people to think that, oh, a dog's a dog, so they should be fine with any dog?
Yes.
I do see that a lot.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense how you're saying this and you're conveying it. Is we just think, oh, it'll be fine. Yep. Like, every dog is fine. They're dogs. They'll get along fine,
Yep.
But everyone has their own, Yeah. I mean, they have, I'm trying to, what am I trying to say?
No, I get what you're trying to say. And I think what it comes, first off, thank you for giving me a little bit of a breather. I was starting to talk really fast.
I know you were.
And I need to take a breath there. Okay, so yes, I think the point you're trying to get is that a lot of people have these false misconceptions of what dogs should and shouldn't be able to do.
Yes.
Right? So everybody thinks that socialization is I go for walks and my dog says hi to all the dogs in the neighborhood and they have their friend next door that lives 3 houses down and, we go to the park and when we see another dog, we get to stop and, the dogs sniff each other for 4 seconds and they're just saying hi to each other. It's fine, and then I get to say hi to the owner and then we keep on going our way. And that is socialization to most people, right?
Yeah.
The problem is that's not real socialization. That's bullshit socialization.
Yeah.
Right? Because again, socialization is like a cycle, right?
Yep.
Socialization is the process of, wow, I meet this other dog. We have this quick little standoff of like, hey, who are you? What's going on? Let me sniff you real quick. What's happening? Then you have the process of them transitioning to playing, which is competing with each other and trying to figure out who's more dominant with the other and taking turns kind of being submissive and dominant and stuff like that. Then you have the cycle of them just like, okay, we've established this relationship with each other. Now we're just going to chill. That's why my dogs, for example, don't play with each other that much anymore. They do sometimes, right? I think dogs, naturally will like to run around and romp with each other and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's nothing like when you introduce 2 new dogs for the first time and they have that really intense, wound up, zipping around, being crazy, jumping all each other kind of play, right?
Yeah.
That's not it because they've established that relationship. And I think the problem is a lot of people don't allow their dog to establish that level of a relationship with any other dogs, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is because they can never go through that natural cycle and finish the cycle, the dog is always in this peak state of just like, I'm not sure still, right? I'm not sure how to be right now. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with this dog. I'm not sure how to do this in an appropriate way, right? So I think that's the misconception is we do this like starting of the socialization, right?
Yeah.
And essentially like blue balls in the dog. Right?
Yeah.
And we never do the formal socialization, which is that true letting them go through the cycle.
Yeah. I think it's like when you're just passing someone and they're sniffing each other. It's kind of like if you go to Starbucks and there's a person in front of you and they're like, hi. And you're like, hi. You don't know that person.
Sure.
You don't know anything about them.
Sure.
And then maybe it's like when you start at a new place at work, you don't know these people yet.
Yes.
But then you start knowing your coworkers. You might become friends with them.
You loosen up. You kind of understand each other's mannerisms and how you talk and communicate and everything. That's a great example, right? Now, the only difference is that example of in line at Starbucks. That will typically never go wrong, because
that's true.
Right? With dogs, the problem is if they haven't established that relationship yet with each other, and because they're naturally competitive creatures, right? that's like that's a really that first introduction is a really high pressure situation for dogs, where for us it's just as simple as hey.
Yeah, true.
Right? So it could go sideways really, really quickly, right? And it also, since they're never going through the cycle, your dog is never learning that sometimes there are dogs out there that are more dominant than them, right? Or more pushy than them, or whatever it may be. And instead, they're kind of just walking around like chest out, like, hey,
Yeah.
hey, hey.
True.
Right?
No, that's true.
Right? That initial introduction is always each dog typically thinking, I'm probably more dominant in this situation. So if they never get, quote unquote, like put in their place or whatever, by any other dogs, that's not creating balance.
There it is.
There it is. Okay, so that's the dog side of the equation. The last one, and this is, in my opinion, arguably the most important one, is the environmental socialization, right? I talk about this a lot. People don't get it. Socialization is not just with dogs and people. It's with environments, right? That means that the dog is comfortable coexisting with what's going on around them. And you get that through exposing your dog to environments in a controlled manner, right? That doesn't mean take them to Home Depot and let them off leash and let them explore and sniff and check everything out. That doesn't mean take them to the park and let them off leash and let them run up to every person and dog that they see. That doesn't mean take them to your friend's house and let them go jump all over their couch and, go steal food off the counters and do all those different types of things.
Yeah.
That means take your dog to as many different environments as possible and make yourself the most interesting thing in that environment. That could either be done with a young dog with food. We'll do a lot of engagement work where maybe, with young dogs, I typically work them for meals and stuff. That could mean that I take their breakfast and I go to Home Depot and we walk into the middle of the store and I just feed them their breakfast out of hand the entire time and then we leave, right? Mm-hmm. That could mean I go to my friend's house and I keep my dog on a leash the entire time and I don't let them interact with any of the people there or the other dog there or whatever it may be, and they just get used to sitting next to me doing nothing. That could mean that we go to the park and just do healing around the park for 20 minutes and then leave, right? Yep. The more that you do stuff like that, the more the dog will start seeing everything else going on around them as furniture, right? And this is where things go wrong, because 9 out of 10 times, most dogs never leave their home environment, right? They go to their home once they're a puppy, right? They stay there and they go for the same exact route every single time on their walks, right?
Yeah.
So they may do all right there, but when you take them somewhere new, it's like, whoa. It's like a whole new world, right? It's
for sure.
It is, and it's the most exciting, magical place you ever knew, right? I think that's the lyrics to that song.
Yes, you're right.
So because everything is so exciting, because you haven't done your job exposing them, they're going to want to interact with all of those things, and they're going to be uncontrollable, right? So that is the most important one, and forget the socialization with the people and the dogs when you're doing that. You're always going to be working on either one or the other. We're either socializing with other dogs, we're either socializing with other people, or we're socializing with environments, right? So when you're socializing with dogs, that means you step back and you ignore the dogs and you play lifeguard and you do not interact with them, because that's about the dog and dog socialization. That means when you're socializing with new people, there's not other dogs there to compete over that resource, which is the affection the people are giving. And that means when you go into the environments, you're not creating outside excitement, because the job is to keep your dog's attention on you in those environments. Pen drop.
And I feel like the other side of the coin of balance is people that get a new dog and then they don't do anything with their puppy, because they're like,
for sure,
he's so young. I can't teach him anything right now. So I think there is that other side of the balance where you got to know that you need to work with your dog, but don't have these extreme high expectations. Yeah. Have that balance.
I would completely agree with that. Okay, so first question in. We're probably like 7 years into that. We're already 40 minutes in. We got through one question. So let's move on to the next one. All right. Which one do I want to do? Let's do Joe Bowers. All right, Joe Bowers asks, podcast question. What are your thoughts on different types of collars? Martingale, prong, standard, buckle, clip, etc. for training purposes. Okay, I get this a lot here. So we have lots of different types of tools that we can put on our dog. Now, let's keep in mind, each one of these tools typically has an intended meaning to it, right? Mm-hmm. I will burn through these ones, and then I'll add a couple additional ones to the equation, right? So martingale collar. So a martingale collar is basically a regular flat collar you would put on your dog that has a section about 4 inches long that's like a loop, right?
Yep.
You're familiar with them, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is as your dog pulls, that loop gets smaller and it snugs the collar up by about 2 inches, right? Now, the martingale collar is not intended to like, when you think snug up, you think like choking, right? The martingale collar is not intended to choke. You're actually intended to keep it loose enough where when there's tension put on it and that loop gets as small as it gets, that it's just tight enough where it's impossible for it to slip over the dog's head, right? Yep. There are tons of dogs that are escape artists. If they really thrash around on most standard collars, their head can get out of them. I believe the martingale was invented by people with like greyhounds and stuff who have really, really skinny heads who needed that, or else the dog would be able to really easily slip out of them. A martingale, for training purposes for me, its function typically serves once the training is complete. If you want to have your dog on some sort of collar in general while you're using your e-collar, a martingale is typically the go-to for it because it's going to be the safest, where if the dog tried to pull off or whatever, they can't slip out of it, right? Prong collar. Obviously, the prong collar is our standard tool that we use for teaching all of our leash communication and stuff, all of our leash pressure work. And a prong collar is essentially a martingale collar that has prongs around it. Now, it's the most intimidating looking training collar that's out there. Most people just see it when I take it out and they're like, oh my God, what the heck is that thing? 2 things I tell everybody. 1, the prongs themselves that you see are 100% blunt. They're rounded off. They're not sharp at all. I could sit there and stab that thing into my hand and it's not going to hurt me, right? The intention of the prong collar is not that those prongs are stabbing into the neck. It's that as they pull, because of that martingale function of applying even pressure around the neck, the prongs get slightly closer together as the dog pulls, and it gives a slight pinching sensation on the neck, right? It's intended to, a lot of people will say, simulate the mother's bite or whatever it may be. I don't know about all of that. It's just a tool that we can get away with using less pressure with because the dog cares more about it, because it's slightly more uncomfortable than a lot of the other collars that we'll use. Now, the prong collar, in my purposes, is a intermediate tool. So I do not use it long-term with dogs. I think it's a very, very, very difficult tool for owners to use as like finishing behaviors off, because I think it's really hard for people to be dynamic with it. Even myself, as somebody who trains dogs, it's very hard to increase and decrease pressure as needed based on what's going on around you, right? Most people are either way too soft on it and can't be firm enough, or they're way too firm on it and they're always starting at a level 11. So when more distractions are present, they can't be more firm with it, right? So prong collar in my training purpose use is going to be it's going to be the intermediate tool that we teach and shape our leash pressure. We make sure the dog understands the muscle memory of following that pressure, getting into different positions, and then we use that physical pressure and directional pressure to then teach our e-collar, because the e-collar has no directional component to it. So we have to pair it with something that has that directional component to it. So prong's a great tool, but it is a short-term tool that we use with dogs. Standard collar. So this is your typical collar that you would go and get from the pet store, right? Typically has a cheap little plastic clip on it. You can get all sorts of fancy little patterns and stuff. These collars, I personally do not use. I think that the only uses for them are either, one, aesthetic purposes of if you want your dog to have donuts around their neck, you can get one that typically has donuts around their neck, or it's really only other purposes to be able to clip tags onto, right? It is not something I ever recommend attaching a leash to, because those plastic buckles are so prone to breaking if a dog pulls on them. They could easily slip out of those collars, and they're not a very effective collar. Buckle collars are very similar. Typically, personally, I think a dog can slip out of them. You could put tags on them, obviously. The buckle, the only difference is you technically could attach a leash to it because it functions just like a belt buckle, where with that, there's nothing to break, right? So if they pull on it, it's not going to break, but they could possibly slip out of it, so I don't use it. Clip, there's not really a clip collar. I mean, I think that's just the same as a standard or buckle. The only other ones I would add into this are going to be halty, so face harness. Some people swear by these as a training tool for leash walking, and I don't have a problem with them. I just don't personally use them because I don't think that they're as versatile as, say, a prong collar is. But they are intended to essentially communicate like you would communicate with a horse. So you have control over the front nose, which means that you could turn the dog's head in different directions. One trainer, Gary Wilkes, uses them pretty exclusively because he says with reactive dogs, it essentially inhibits the chance of there being a bite, because if they lunge at a dog, it'll turn their head away from the dog and they can't actually land a bite. I think they're a little bit more aversive on dogs than a prong collar or any other tool, which is why I don't do them. Just like muzzles, right? Anything that's restricting the dog's face or their kind of range of motion and stuff, I think causes them to fight it a lot. And since I don't rely on the leash as my primary means of communication long term, I prefer not to go through the fight of introducing that tool. Next one, harness, the most bullshit tool on the market. I don't give a shit if it's a front clip or if it's a rear clip or it's a whatever kind of harness. They're stupid. Harnesses, by definition, are intended to make it more comfortable for the dog to pull into. That's why sled dogs wear them. That's why any sort of dog that's pulling any sort of cart or anything wears harnesses. And even the front clip, it's counterintuitive, because you're putting a tool on the dog that's going to be encourage pulling because it's positioned on the strongest part of the body, the chest, but then you're also saying it has something that's deterring the pulling, which makes no sense at all. Throw those away. They're trash. And I've seen a lot of dogs be able to slip out of those pretty effectively. Last one would be the e-collar. The e-collar is our primary means of communication, and it is an electronic collar that we use to finish off behaviors that we've taught. So we pair it with the prong collar like I talked about. We make sure that the dog has a clear understanding of that prong collar pressure. We pair the e-collar pressure into it, and then the e-collar essentially becomes our invisible leash, allowing us to communicate effectively.
So out of that list,
Yep.
would you say the biggest tool misconception would be the martingale? Like, I feel like people think that they can use that as a training tool.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Or a slip lead, right?
Yeah.
So a slip lead's another one I'll add to that. So a slip lead is a leash and collar in one. It slips over the head. It functions like a martingale, but it doesn't have like kind of a more of a choking sensation to it.
Yeah.
I personally like slip leads a lot, not for a training purpose, but because they're typically lightweight. I don't like my dogs to have a bunch of junk around their neck. So since I use the e-collar to primarily reinforce, I'm going to put the e-collar on, I'm going to slip a slip lead on, and then we're going to go for a walk, and then we could just take that off really easily when we get home. But yeah, a martingale or a slip lead, I think a lot of people will look at and think they could train the dog with it, just because a lot of trainers out there kind of show videos of them using slip leads like that. Even Caesar did that a lot, where he walks dogs with slip leads and he's like, here, look, see, you just need this.
Yeah. Was a choke chain on there as well?
No, choke chain is it's a slip collar.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And that's another tool that is more of an old school dog. I think the choke chain came out before the prong collar, and a lot of people use that as more of a corrective device because you can give these kind of big choking corrections with it. The problem is the dog cares so little about it typically, and the way the choke chain functions, where the two rings meet when you actually pull on it, all of the pressure goes in that spot on the neck. So if you're using it to give big corrections, it's really dangerous actually, because you could, a lot of dogs can develop like tracheal damage and stuff from getting all that pressure put right on the center of the neck.
Yep.
Or collapsed esophagus and stuff like that. It's just a really dangerous tool, in my opinion. Not that I'm against giving big corrections, but with a prong collar, for example, if I'm going to give a big leash correction with it, because it applies all that tension evenly around the neck and because it's not choking, there is little to no risk in actually doing any damage on the dog, like long-term physically.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so many different training collars out there. My order of operations here is with a puppy, martingale or slip collar, because you're not really doing a whole lot of formal corrections and stuff. From there, we add in the prong collar into the mix, where we start utilizing the leash to create more firm boundaries, teach commands, things like that. Then I transition to the e-collar. Once I have the e-collar taught, I use the e-collar for all of my primary communicating, and then I'll use a slip lead to put on, just because there's leash laws and because I need to have a leash on my dog. So that's kind of the order of operations that I typically will use. Okay. Burning through these.
That was a good one.
It is a good one.
These are good questions.
I got a couple more good ones here. So this is a two-part one from Emma Parlett. First off, I would like to thank Emma Parlett. Emma works at Platform Brewery, and our next evening podcast we do is going to be sponsored by Platform Brewery. Platform donated 6 new beers that they have to us to taste while we're doing our podcast. And because Emma works there, she got that hookup for us. That's so very cool. Nice. Got 6 different ones. So yeah, Josh doesn't drink, obviously, so I got to wait till we get some guests on here.
That's okay.
We'll burn through those.
I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah. Go Platform. They rock. All right. So Emma asks, I've started following a lot of trainers and see that a lot of people use podiums to build confidence in the dog. Thoughts? This was a really good question. Also, she asked another one after that we'll get into after this one that I think is a very good question as well. So confidence building work, right? A lot of people have gone to implementing things like agility equipment or podiums or any of that kind of stuff to build confidence in dogs. Now, yay or nay? I would say yay. It's a good idea. I think any time that you take something that the dog is stressed out about that you know is not actually scary, and you teach your dog to essentially do that thing to a point where they're fluent in it and no longer scared of it, that builds confidence, right? Okay. That could be, we go to the park and my dog is scared of trash cans, and every time I walk by a trash can, my dog lunges away from it or towards it or whatever it may be. And, every time my dog does that, I correct them and I put them back in the heel position until they start walking smoothly past it. That builds confidence. Even though I'm using consequences to teach that, I'm building confidence in my dog by teaching them to not be scared of that thing and be able to walk calmly past it, right? If my dog doesn't want to go up or down stairs. We see this all the time with puppies. We have stairs at our facility going to our second floor. We go to walk up to the stairs. The owner picks the dog up and carries them up it. I tell them, nope, put the dog back on the ground and just walk up the stairs. And we'll see these dogs sometimes throw a huge tantrum, and then finally they'll start moving because we don't give them another option. And then guess what? When we go back down them, we do the same thing. And then the next time they come in, the dog walks up the stairs, no problem. That builds confidence. Even though I had a big fight with my dog to get them to go up those stairs, once they realize that being on them is not scary, that builds confidence, right? Agility equipment. If I have a teeter-totter and I teach the dog to get up and down the teeter-totter and they were scared to do that initially, that builds confidence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So yes, these podiums or these different things or whatever it may be is fine, right? The issue is I think a lot of people will put a lot of emphasis on that in their training classes, right? So as a trainer, they'll spend an entire session teaching the owner to do different things like that.
Gotcha.
I don't have a problem with it, right? It's beneficial to the dog. It is not beneficial to the dog. I think there are more productive uses of my time than doing that with my clients, where I could just tell them, this is something I used to do with board and trains, go to the playground and walk up and down the stairs and go over the little bridge that wobbles and stuff like that, and just get your dog doing all that stuff, right? You can do all of that on your own. You don't need to come to my training facility to get your dog up on top of podiums and stuff like that, right? So yay, it's positive. It does build confidence. But, as a trainer, I have better things I could teach you to do than to get your dog with a leash up onto a chair or up onto a podium or this or that.
Yeah, it's more of an extracurricular.
For sure. Do it on your own. I absolutely recommend doing it on your own. I'm probably not going to do a ton of it in my class unless, here's the only caveat, unless I have a dog that the owner has tried to do those things on their own and they can't physically get the dog to do it and they need a little extra help, we will put a little emphasis on it. Last night, I had a dog chocolate lab that was scared to jump into the car, right? Dog's been like that since he was a puppy. Owner couldn't get him to do it. I told them to try to do it with a leash. They were struggling with it. So at the end of the lesson, at the end of the lesson, we went outside. We used the leash to get the dog in. We spent 10 minutes doing it. Dog was great with it by the end of it. We built the dog's confidence by teaching them they could, in fact, jump into the car, right? So that's kind of how I look at those things. Here's the other side of the question. Okay, also, I've seen trainers do the double down, which is body down, head down to get into a relaxed state. Okay, this one I don't like, right? Are you familiar with the double down?
I'm not. Please enlighten me.
Let me sip my coffee. Hold on. Next podcast episode sponsored by Starbucks. God, we're almost an hour in. Jesus Christ. All right, so the double down is you put your dog into a down position. What is the down position? The down position is being down, having your elbows locked down, physically just being in a down position. I think everybody knows kind of what that is, right? The double down takes it one step further, and it forces the dog then to take their head and rest their head and their chin completely on the ground.
Okay, so total flat.
Total flat. Head is not allowed to move up from the floor, right?
Okay.
Here's the way that I look at this kind of stuff. Why do you need to do... So she asked it, putting the body and head down to get into a relaxed state. So here's the thing. You have dogs that do things because they have to do things, and you have dogs do things because of the state of mind that they're in. I am not necessarily a believer that because you put the dog in a physical position, that means that they're relaxed. For example, if you told me, David, go lay on your bed, and I went and laid on my bed, does that mean that I'm tired and want to go to sleep?
No.
Exactly, right? If I was tired and went and laid on my bed and took a nap, does that mean that I'm tired?
Yes.
Exactly, right? If I tell a dog, get in the down position, right? And my dog is, I'm all amped up. Oh my God, there's a dog over there. I'm so excited. This is cool. There's things going on around me. Squeak, 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 right? Does that mean that they're relaxed?
No.
If that same dog, I then say, put your chin down on the ground, does that mean they're relaxed?
Definitely not.
No, come on. So here's the thing. So what you're doing is you're putting the dog into a physical position to try to tell the owner the dog is now in a more relaxed state because I'm forcing them to be in that relaxed state.
Yeah.
Right? That's not the way that it works, right? The dog has to organically go through the cycle of chilling out on their own so we can pattern in that relaxed state of mind. So for example, I'm not going to do 15 downs over the course of 5 minutes doing the double down, making their chin go on the ground to put them into a relaxed state of mind. I'm going to make the dog do one down stay around those things that are stressed out for 30 minutes until they chill out and organically put their chin down on the ground so that I could pattern in, you're holding yourself together, you're composing yourself. I know you're excited and stuff, but eventually you're going to chill out, and they chill out organically on their own. And then I accomplish more because it's not just the physical, it's also the emotional state of mind.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Makes total sense. I think your approach to it, where you look more for the hip swing.
Sure.
I think that shows more of a stability in a down.
Yep. But not only that, I've had a hard time. The double down is more of a new thing. This is something I've seen pop up in the last year, maybe. And I guess I've had a little bit of a hard time really verbalizing to people why I have such an issue with it. I think another side of the equation is the purpose of doing the down around the triggers and stuff that they're stimulated by is to create calmness, right? But it's not to force the looks of a calm position. It's to put the dog in a position where they at least are stable so they could then go through all of those emotions on their own until they learn to be calm around that trigger. And I don't think that you could force that calmness. I think it has to come organically.
Yeah.
And I think the double down is forcing that calmness. And here's the thing. There are certain things that when you're around certain triggers, I think that you have to almost loosen your criteria, right? So if a dog is so amped up that you could just barely get them to even hold that down, by then increasing that criteria to you have to put your chin down on the ground, you're making it that much harder for the dog to do it, which decreases the likelihood that it's even going to be successful. And what you wind up doing is you wind up fighting with the dog to try to get them to put their chin down on the ground, where instead you could loosen up that criteria and just do a regular down, and the dog is going to be more successful, which is going to create less stress, which is going to cause the dog to relax more quickly, right? If the dog felt like, I can't even physically, look at how restrictive of a position this is, right? I literally can't even move from this position. If I move from this position, I'm going to get corrected, right?
Yeah.
That's I don't know. I might be humanizing this, right? But that sounds super, super stressful to me. Right?
Yeah.
And that sounds like my dog is never going to organically chill out because they're literally if I move, I'm going to get fried right now. Like that just seems so unfair. And it feels, I don't like that that's become a trend, because I've seen trainers do that before. And I've seen clients come in who have worked with trainers that try to teach this. And I've watched them I remember one dog in particular, this dog Atticus that I worked with. I remember her coming in for training. She had done a board and train with another trainer somewhere, she did something with another trainer, another well-known trainer. And she comes in, she puts the dog on the bed, and the dog was chilling on the bed, but kind of whiny and stuff like that. And she sat there and just repeatedly over and over was correcting him while he's laying on the bed doing, in my opinion, the right thing, right? And I asked her, I was like, what are you doing? She's like, well, he's not calm. I was like, well, yeah, he's in a new place. He's stimulated, right? He's going to have to learn environmental socialization, right? Like we just talked about. He's going to have to learn to be calm in this environment. We can't force that. And like I said, she probably corrected him 10 or 15 times and accomplished nothing out of it, right? Yeah. As opposed to just leave him be. Let him chill out there. And what happened is when we let him chill out there, he organically calmed down on his own. Yeah. So I really don't like that double down thing. I've just seen it so much. I'm not a fan of it.
Well,
so.
and just having her come in and then correcting the dog to relax. I need you to relax.
That's a good point.
I mean, you would just be like,
Jesus,
I can't.
I know.
Give me a minute, And I mean, he was staying on the bed, correct?
He was.
So, yeah, I mean,
Leave him be.
what's he doing?
Some dogs, I think a lot of this also comes down to from a broader spectrum. There are some dogs out there that have limitations with certain things or have certain degrees of anxiety that are not just going to go away. Let's use crate anxiety as another one because we see this a lot with dogs that come in for board and trains, right? There are some dogs that are going to be naturally anxious in the crate and they're going to be a little whiny or a little restless or things like that. And the restlessness that you're seeing is so subconscious, right? Do you realize all the time when you start getting worked up, whether it's you're anxious or you're excited or you're angry or whatever it may be, are you always that conscious of that state of mind that you're in?
No.
How many times does Devin tell you, Josh, you're being a fucking dick right now? I don't know. I mean, like
Probably more than needed to be.
You know,
yeah.
like same, right? Like Kate will tell me that all the time, right? It's like, hey, you're being like, I don't know, whatever, too much right now or something.
Yeah.
You know? And I'll look and be like, and what's our natural response? No, I'm not. You don't get
Yeah. No, definitely. I feel that. Yeah. You don't realize it, and then you're like, oh, you'll maybe realize it later.
Yeah. So if it's subconscious, how are they going to be aware enough to be able to stop that without us reasoning through it with them? If this is why you're anxious and you don't need to be anxious, and we're going to have like talk therapy with our dogs, right? So that's my opinion on that situation. I don't like it. Don't do that. Just do a regular down. All right. Next one here.
She came with beer and good questions.
Alrighty. Next one from Brittany Gidley. Brittany asks, I would love to hear your thoughts on how to keep walking manners consistent when a dog has multiple caregivers, pet sitters, kids, etc. Thank you for amazing content. Always. We are excited for episode 6. Thank you, Brittany. Manners with multiple people. All right. So here's the thing. So you got to keep in mind 2 things. One is the rules with you are the rules with you, right? So when you are walking your dog, right, can hold them to A, B, C, or D criteria, and no matter what anybody else does, that criteria will stay the same as long as you're consistent about enforcing it. I'll give you 2 examples here, right? One time I was in Columbus at our facility, and I took Vera to go get groomed, right? I took her to a grooming salon, left her there for an hour or so, came back to pick her up, right? And I remember when I came back to pick her up, I'm standing in the lobby, and they bring her out, and she's like dragging them down the way over towards me. And as soon as she gets to me and realizes it's me, she sat down and she sat there like a perfect angel while I checked out and stuff. And I remember the person being like, oh my gosh, like I've never seen a dog not completely lose their mind as soon as they saw their owner like that. Why, she's so well behaved, right? The reason for that is because there's never been a time in my life that I've encouraged that state of mind. So though she may have thought for a split second, oh, I'm going somewhere with this new lady, I'm going to drag around and pull and this and that. As soon as she saw me, she's like, oh, that shit don't fly with him.
Yeah.
Right? Second example here, right? My parents, right? When I leave Vera with my parents, no matter what, she will always be 25% less well-behaved than when I'm around. I remember one time I left her with them for like a week while I was out of town or whatever it was. And when I came back to pick her up, I walk up to the front door and I see her with her little paws on the front door staring out the window. I'm like, Vera, what the hell are you doing right now? You're not supposed to be jumping on the window, right? Yeah. She realized what she can get away with them.
Yeah.
But as soon as I got there, rules were back to normal, right? If I gave her a command or whatever it was, she was going to listen right away because I was consistent about enforcing that criteria. Now, here's the thing. Does that mean that it's going to be this effortless transition every time your dog is with somebody else and then comes back to you? No, not necessarily. Because the reason why it's so good is because I go into those situations predicting, okay, you've gotten away with a lot of shit for the last 7 days right now, so you may or may not try something. So I'm positioning myself to be able to address whatever issue it is immediately, right? Mm-hmm. As soon as I get into that house, if she tried to jump on me or didn't listen to a command or whatever it was, am I in a position to be able to firmly correct for that, like more firmly than I normally would for something, to set that tone immediately of, I know you got away with stuff here right now with this person, but it's not going to happen with me, right? Mm-hmm. Because I've done that, that's why I have that reliability of as soon as they see me, they know we mean business again, right? Mm-hmm. Now, looking at this in a different way, keeping manners consistent with the other people, Now, this is a hard one because there's nothing that you do that's going to make your dog perfect with everybody else, because training is relationship based, right? Your dog has to develop and establish a working relationship with all of these individual people if you want them to listen, right? So what things can you do? Well, if you have a consistent pet sitter, if that pet sitter is taking your dog for walks all the time, you could show them the ropes of how to walk the dog successfully. And if they follow those rules, the dog should pick up on it pretty quickly, right? You can do other things to at least make it a little bit less bad, right? So for example, like if the dog goes from being perfect with you to just a psychopath for the pet sitter, then and if you know they're not going to be as effective with the e-collars we want, maybe incorporate a prong collar back into the mix, right? And start utilizing that prong collar to give corrections in that situation, as opposed to using the e-collar. And that might at least make it more manageable, where it might not be as perfect as it is with you, but it's going to be significantly better where it's not causing a problem and there's going to be less contrast, right? Kids is a hard one because it depends on the age of the kids, right? Young children, I always say, no matter what, they're, if you have your hierarchy in the house, you have the adults, you have the children underneath, and then you have the dog underneath that, right? So technically, even though your children should be like a step above the dog, it's our job to kind of manage that household, where if we're not around, the dog probably won't listen to them very well, right? Yeah. I don't really like giving children under the age of like 10 an e-collar or a prong collar to use with dogs. I don't necessarily think that's super safe, nor do I really think that children that young should be taking your dog out and about to different places anyways. I've heard so many stories of kids walking dogs that have lost control of the dog and the dog ran over and attacked something, a dog or something like that. Kids getting knocked over because a dog sees a squirrel or something like that. So I think you have to manage the children thing from the standpoint of, is the kid old enough to really do some of the training and start establishing that working relationship? And if not, the kid should really not be alone with the dog that often where there's going to be problems. Yeah. So that's the way I look at these ones.
Cool. Let's take a battery break.
Battery break. Hold on. All right, we're back. Battery break's over. Woo! All right, on to the next question. We're burning through these. Okay. Austin asks, one I just had with Bonnie. I brought her over my uncle's to play with his Shar-Pei puppy, who Bonnie has played with before. For some reason this time she didn't want to play at all and was being kind of aggressive and mean towards her. When I buzzed her, it's like she thought the other dog was doing that to her, and it ticked her off even more. That's the only thing that I haven't been able to wrap my head around. Okay, so a couple things here. So this is our socialization topic that we're talking about right now. This is somewhat common that I'll see is, when we go to socialize our dogs with different, people or friends or whatever it may be, we'll start to have issues here and there. This is a dog that Bonnie has met before. Now for everybody, Bonnie has done some one-on-one sessions with us before. She's kind of a sassy little French bulldog, whatever. Has two other dogs living in the house with her, so I know that she's a relatively social dog, but she did have a lot of reactivity issues and kind of fear-based issues and stuff when she first started. So, first and foremost, we have to ask ourselves, did we set up the socialization situation appropriately, right? So when we set up that socialization situation, did we make sure that we made the socialization only about the dogs? Did we remove the food, the toys, the affection from the mix, right? As long as we did that, once we let the dogs together, what were the aggressive displays that you saw? Was it just that she was kind of postury and maybe letting out some growls or this or that or whatever it may be, which frankly, in my opinion, I kind of step back as much as possible from. I really try to avoid overcorrecting for things in socialization. I really try to let dogs figure out most of this stuff on their own as much as I can. And I understand that growling or posturing or any of those things are sometimes very normal parts of socialization, right? Just because a dog is growling does not mean that they're being aggressive. Sometimes that is a way of them displaying that dominance and seeing if they can kind of compete with that other dog a little bit. So a lot of times where I see this go wrong is people will put the dogs into the mix, and as soon as they put the dogs into the mix, there will be that kind of initial confrontational, right? And we'll immediately jump in and try to micromanage it. And what happens is, just like you saw here when you buzzed her, right? And buzz means corrected with the e-collar, obviously. It kind of pissed her off, right? And antagonized her more because she was like, no, hey, I'm trying to communicate with this dog right now. I'm trying to kind of assert myself or whatever it may be. So quit doing that. That's annoying me, right? We'll see stuff like that happen. Or we'll see owners jump in and try to separate the dogs physically, which amplifies the situation as opposed to letting that cycle go, right? So what we need to do is we need to put her in the situation. We need to remove the food, the toys, the affection. We need to let most of this stuff slide, because you saying she was being kind of aggressive and mean towards her, that doesn't lead me to believe that your dog was attacking the other dog by any means. Maybe she was just seemingly bullying the other dog, right? Mm-hmm. Most of that you gotta let slide, right? You gotta just allow it to go through its natural cycle. And if there actually is something you want to stop, if you become no longer comfortable in what she's doing, or you want to chill her out or whatever it may be, typically what I'll do is I'll kind of test things as opposed to just giving her correction. And what I mean by that is I'm going to utilize an obedience command. So say the come command, right? I'm going to give my come command, and because I know she's super distracted, I'm going to go into that situation being ready to correct as firmly as I can. And say she doesn't come in that situation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell her no, and I'm going to correct all the way up on the e-collar, not just at a 20 or a 30 or a 40 or a 50 or a naggy level correction. I'm going to give a correction that I know is going to be motivating enough to get her attention off of that. And this is somewhat dog specific here because I know Bonnie is not that sensitive to the e-collar, so she can handle that high level correction. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to correct firmly enough where she's like, whoa, that was not something that's just going to piss me off more, right? Because here's the thing, she's not associating it with the dog like you're saying here. She's associating it with just, I'm getting nagged right now and it's pissing me off in general, and currently my attention is fixated on the other dog, so I'm just going to seem more snarky from that correction with her, right? So give that correction really, really high, get her to disengage from that dog, and then once you got her to be compliant with that command, let her go back and interact. And what you're going to see is through doing repeated things like that, periodically throughout the socialization, and confirming that if I give that command or whatever, I can get my dog to disengage immediately without the need of any other commands. You'll get a dog that starts checking in with you a little bit more, and as opposed to taking things to like a level 11 every time they see another dog, they'll keep it at like a level 8 or something. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be super worried about this. It sounds like you probably haven't really... you probably really haven't had the dogs together that often, and there very well may have been some kind of outside factors at play there. Also, if Bonnie's had issues with this other dog, I don't know if you brought your other dogs to play as well in that situation. Maybe do just Bonnie and the other dog and let this cycle go through organically like we just discussed. So that's a pretty easy one.
I think we've talked about that too a couple episodes ago, where people will have this notion to stop anytime they hear a little bit of a growl or
noise, or even the play. We'll see the play. You know, these dogs are having a great time and jumping around playing and stuff like that. And the people will be like, whoa, I don't know about that. And they try to step in. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you were talking about you're stopping that cycle of the dogs figuring each other out.
Because here's the thing. If there is an issue and Bonnie's just like, hey, you know, this puppy's starting to mature a little bit, the puppy's starting to get a little bit more confident and stuff and kind of pushing back, you're going to see them compete a little bit more intensely, right? Mm-hmm. If this dog is starting to hit that age where it's going through the maturity cycle and stuff, you're going to see the relationship that dog has with other dogs is going to be significantly different.
Yep.
Right? So you have to let it kind of take its course there, right? Mm-hmm. All right, next one here. This one is from Brittany. Different Brittany.
So many Brittany's.
Brittany says... Oh, man, this is going to potentially be a long one. Jesus Christ. All right. I think you guys have a cool concept to dealing with reactivity, breaking down how you guys do it since everyone handles it so differently. All right. The ever-going topic of dog reactivity. The number one goddamn behavioral issue out there right now.
Yep.
I don't know why, but actually, I know why, obviously. It is such a struggle, man. People that have dog reactive dogs have a really, really, really hard time working through it, right? Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. So we have to figure out, first and foremost, what is the dog reactivity, right? Dog reactivity, first off, has very little correlation between actual dog aggression, usually, right? So first and foremost, what I want to do is I want to figure out, is the dog reactivity coming from just that dog reactivity, which is a frustrated response due to a barrier, right? Mm-hmm. Windows, leashes, fences, cars, whatever it may be, anything that's holding your dog back from getting to something that they want to get to is, in my opinion, or creates reactivity, right? So it creates that frustrated response, which turns into the barking, the growling, all of that kind of stuff, right? Other times, dog reactivity could really be stemming from a social issue, right? So if a dog is very, very nervous or insecure around other dogs, we'll see that, they'll be more likely to act defensive out on the walk when they see those other dogs, right? So the first thing I do when I work with dog reactive dogs, once I have some baseline communication established and an ability to correct the dog as needed for socialization and stuff like that, is I socialize the dog. I see, is this dog's dog reactivity stemming from social skills that they need better, right? Are they aggressive towards other dogs? Or is the dog super, super playful and potentially been underexposed to other dogs? Because we'll see that a lot, where people will get dogs and they'll see the dog that's super reactive at the leash. And because they're so reactive, they never go to socialize them because they think it's aggression. And what happens is you essentially turn dogs into being this novel thing that I never get to interact with, and I have this frustrated response of seeing them on the leash all the time, and the reactivity becomes tenfold. So first things first is we need to give the dog a social outlet. We need to make sure that they could let off some of that energy if they've never been able to socialize with other dogs before, and make sure they're going to know how to properly interact with them, right?
Yep.
And if they are aggressive towards other dogs and really scared and growly and snappy and trying to go after them and stuff like that, that we work through those social skills as well. So you essentially attack it at its root first, right? Attack it at the core. You make sure you address that side of things. Once we have that established, we could check the box of, okay, my dog doesn't have a social issue with other dogs right now. They have two things. They have an impulse control issue, right? Which is, I can't keep my shit together when I see other dogs out on the walk, right? And then we also have a lack of understanding of the barrier issue, which is I don't understand the leash, right? And because of that, it's building frustration. So the next thing that I do is I teach my leash walking. And when I teach my leash walking, I don't just kind of half-ass, my dog kind of knows how to heel and they don't really pull that much. I mean perfect, right? And this one, I tell everybody, man, not the leash walking has to be perfect. You have to be able to go for a walk and have your dog stay in the heel position, and whether that leash was there or not, know they're going to stay there, and know you have a means of enforcing it if the dog does not do it, typically with the e-collar in those situations. And that's the next step of the equation, right? Once we've checked the box of my dog is social, my dog has a social outlet and does not have socialization skills or issues with other dogs, and my dog is perfect on a leash, and I know they know how to keep their shit under control on the leash, then what you do is you start combining the things where I go for a walk, I see another dog, and I hold my dog accountable for doing the specific thing, or for not doing the specific thing I'm asking them to do. That could be breaking the heel position, right? They're breaking the heel position. They don't have the impulse control to stay in the heel position because they're too excited by the other dog, right? We correct them firmly for that. We make sure that they hold that heel position. That could be a down. I have you in a down. You see another dog. You start freaking out, losing your marbles at the other dog. Well, I need to hold you to that down position, right? And what we do is we little by little re-expose the dog back to these triggers in a controlled way, knowing we have something clear to hold them to. And we do it with the expectation that we're not going to see the reactivity go from super, super, super jacked up to completely gone initially. We're going to first and foremost focus on, can we just keep the dog under control around these triggers? And this goes back to the conversation about you can't force calmness. You have to create the calmness around these triggers. So let's say I'm at the park, and normally when I'm at the park, my dog loses its mind and freaks out at every dog that it sees, right? And we go to the park, and this time I put them in a down, and I correct them super firmly if they break that down, and my dog holds the down the entire time they're at the park while dogs are going by and stuff, but my dog's like whining really loudly while they're in the down. Is that successful? Yeah. That's a hell of a lot better than your dog almost pulling you over every time it sees another dog and lunging at them and this and that. Now, what happens is every time as we go to do that, we see that arousal level decrease and decrease and decrease and decrease to the point where those first couple downs you do, they're at the edge of their seat. It's really hard for them to hold, and they really want to pop up and jump at that other dog every single time that they see it. But they know that they need to stay there. And then the next time, they're like, okay, cool. I kept my shit under control. I'm going to stay in this down. I'm still a little excited, but I'm going to be a little bit calmer. And then the next time it's going to be a little bit calmer. And the next time it's going to be a little bit calmer. And the cycle goes on like that, right? Other techniques that you could implement into this that we used to do a lot of. Addressing the physical motion towards the other dog. So sometimes, let's take the heel position. Sometimes the heel position is really hard to tell Is the dog in the heel position, or are they veering towards the other dog, or whatever it may be? I used to do a lot of drills, and I'll still do this sometimes, where if another dog is coming, I'll pull off to the side. I won't put my dog in a physical position. I'll just stand there, and I'll keep my eyes on the dog's front two paws. And what I'll do is the second that I see one of those paws move in the direction of the trigger, I'll give a really high correction for that, right?
Okay.
Now, what that does is this reduces the criteria with some dogs that are really, really bad with other dogs, right? This reduces the criteria where it's not as restrictive of a position, like being in a down or being in a heel position. And when I give that correction, I give the dog an alternative where instead of moving forward, you can move backwards away from the trigger as much as you want to, right? What that does is allows the dog to feel a little bit less physically restrained. It allows the dog to feel a little bit less mentally restrained, and it allows them to kind of keep their calm and their composure a little bit better with those things. Reactivity can be really challenging with some dogs. It's something that a lot of people wind up struggling with because they don't have those leash walking skills accomplished. They do too much on-leash greetings, which just creates more conditioned arousal with other dogs when you see them out on the walk. And it can be a big-time problem. So this is one we could really dig deep into, but that's kind of the broad answer to our process of doing it is address social skills first, make sure the social skills are where they need to be, teach your leash walking perfect, make sure that you have an ability to hold the dog accountable really firmly for it, address the triggers head-on utilizing either stationary positions, so a downstay or a heel position, or the motion drill if that's too hard for your dog, of just don't move towards the other dog. And with those things, my corrections are always as firm as I can make them. I'm typically working all the way up on the e-collar, or I'm using something like a pet corrector or a bonker to be able to address those types of things because I want to make sure those corrections are going to count. And with a lot of these reactive dogs, we just see their arousal level go from like 0 to 100 so quickly that even if your dog works really low on the e-collar 9 out of 10 times, we need to make sure that we're capping off that behavior with as high of a level as we can get to quickly gain control over the situation. So that's our approach for working through that.
I think a really good thing to ask people is what you said kind of in the beginning of that question. If you went up to somebody that thought they have their dog under control on a walk, how many of them would be able to say yes to, hey, if you didn't have that leash, would your dog stay here?
Yep.
Like,
you've heard me ask that a bunch of times.
Yeah, and how few people would actually be confident in that. Mm-hmm. So if you're not confident in that, then how can you say that your dog is well trained on that?
Yeah. I mean, that goes back to the conversation of the leash walking being perfect, right? Mm-hmm. Most people are okay with mediocre leash walking because they haven't experienced perfect leash walking, right? So what I mean by that is if you could hold the leash and every now and then feel a little tension or a little tug or the dog stops to sniff or does this or does that, most people are okay with that as long as their shoulder is still intact.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
The problem gets into, though, again, okay, drop the leash. What happens when you drop the leash? Will your dog stay with you or will your dog not stay with you the entire time? And most times it's a no. Most times your leash walking is not as good as you think, right? Your dog is just relatively good at not pulling on the leash.
Yeah. And I think that would be a good eye-opener for anybody if everyone just had that in their mind. Like, if I drop this, would Rufus stay with me?
Rufus.
Yes. That's the most generic dog name I could think of at the time.
Yep. Okay, we got one more question here. This is another good one from another client of ours. All right, so this question is from Janelle. Not even sure how to frame this question. I know it is related to spoiling Rosie and humanizing her. I have family and friends with untrained dogs, and Rosie loves my family and friends, and they love and spoil her. I'm worried that them bringing their dog over wouldn't be a let the dogs play and don't intervene situation. I worry Rosie would resource guard me or my friends. She is fine at daycare because it's a very controlled environment. Outside of daycare, she has only had one playmate, and that was with someone that I didn't know prior to that. I have seen her mean side before, and am paranoid that will happen again. Any suggestions or introductions? Suggestions for introductions. Should it be at a neutral location? Outdoors versus indoors? How would I correct her if she started to act aggressive? E-collar, pet corrector, any other tips or suggestions? All right, this is a two-part question here because you got the conversation of the initial the untrained dogs and the family and friends that loves and spoils her, and you're worried that them bringing their dogs over wouldn't be a let the dogs play and don't intervene situation. So let's address that first. So here's the thing. I have friends that have dogs that I would probably never in a million years take my dogs over to go play with them, right? Nothing against them or their dogs or anything like that. I just know that they live in very different ways with their dogs than I do, right? Which is totally okay because everybody has their routines and everybody has their things that they're comfortable with doing and so on, right? I know with my dogs and potentially their dogs and whatever else that if I were to put my dogs in those situations, that those people would probably be doing a lot of the things I recommend not doing when socializing other dogs, and it would probably create problems. So because of that, I just don't go there, right? I am not interested in changing anybody's mind on how they should be interacting with their dogs or how they should be socializing their dogs or anything like that, right? So you got to look at each one of these people and have that conversation of, hey, and this might be an internal conversation of, is this person actually going to be the person that is going to be beneficial to socialize my dog with, right? Or the dog to be beneficial to socialize my dog with, right? And if it's a no, that's fine. Don't worry about it, But I would bet you that of your friends, you could find at least one of them that you could set up a controlled play date with if you really communicate to them, this is the way that it needs to be, right? So with that, I wouldn't worry a whole lot about it if, there's only one out of all of those friends you could do it with. And you need to become comfortable with the fact that your dog is not going to be the dog that gets to go to all of the barbecues and the little parties that you have and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And gets to just be the social butterfly, because you're right. It would not be beneficial, because here's the thing. My dogs, given the wrong situations, would start resource guarding me or my friends. My dogs would resource guard their toys or their food if it were out, if there were other dogs that they didn't know and didn't have a relationship with coming up to them constantly. My dogs would do all of those things that Rosie would do in those situations, and that's okay because I don't need to take them to those situations. I want to make sure that I'm keeping them safe and I'm keeping them in a position where only positive social experiences are going to happen with them, right? So you have to be okay with that first and foremost here, right? And that's the reason why she's able to do so well at daycare when she comes, is because, yeah, it is a controlled environment, but it's not that every other dog is trained. That's the important thing. The part that's important is that we're following those rules of no food, no toys, no affection while we're socializing. Now, once your dog starts to develop that relationship with these individual dogs to the point where it's past just, we just met each other and we're all wound up to go play and all this kind of stuff, you could loosen up on those rules a little bit, obviously, and it's not as big of a deal. Like with my dogs, obviously, I'm able to pet my dogs when they're all out together or give them toys or give them food and stuff because they have that relationship and their own social hierarchy amongst each other. But initially, when we're first getting them together, we have to make sure we let them develop that relationship before we add all those other things into the mix, right? And you could even have that conversation with these people of, hey, listen, Rosie is a little bit special. She needs a little bit more special attention, when it comes to her socialization with other dogs. I really, really want to socialize her, and I really would love you guys to help me with this. Is there any way that we could just do it this way one time, right?
Yeah.
We could go hang out in the backyard, and we could have a couple beers, and we could stand there and ignore the dogs and interact with each other while our dogs are interacting with each other, and it's not that big of a deal, right? And honestly, if your friends say no to that, like, fuck off, Like, that's kind of rude at that point if these are like good family and friends of yours, if they can't help you out with something specific that you need help with, right? So as far as if she started having issues, first off, if you're already uncomfortable with doing it, which it sounds like you are, use a muzzle. You have a muzzle for her, right? You can introduce her on muzzle the first 3 times that you go to do it to make sure that you could take a breath and relax. And like we talked about in the last case with Bonnie, if she does have any issues, right? If she does go after one of the other dogs or this or that, use your e-collar to correct for it, use your pet corrector to correct for it, or just separate them for a couple minutes and put them back together. Rosie is not a super aggressive dog where this is going to be a big problem, I don't think. She's just an under-socialized dog. So you got to get that socialization a little bit better with her first. So, and that's how I would do it. And I wouldn't overthink it if they say no.
Yeah.
I would rather her have one positive social experience at daycare per month than a bunch of like half-assed ones where you're putting her in a position where there's going to be a problem, because that's not going to be beneficial at all.
Exactly. You remember Titan Kilo, right? Yeah. So I guess this story's more of I'm the friend.
Sure.
We had a friend, their dog was named Janice. She's not been around dogs at this point for most of her life. So they wanted to get her involved with some dogs. We had Titan and Kilo. Titan really doesn't like new dogs. Didn't like any kind of socialization with other dogs besides Kilo. We took that into account and we said, hey, bring Janice over. It's okay. We'll put Titan aside and we'll just let Kilo and Janice have their time together. And it worked out great. We put Titan away. We had Kilo out in the backyard. Janice had a great time. She had to get used to it, but then they started playing, everything like that. But we made it a wonderful experience for them not to have to worry about Janice and be able to have a good time and see how it played out. And after that, they came over multiple times with Janice. But as you said, we took that time to make it comfortable for them to bring their dog over. And I don't think that's a difficult thing to have to ask your friend. Like, hey, would you be down to do that for us?
Yeah. I think a lot of it, Janelle, has to do with maybe you not being clear enough with that conversation with them or not having even had that conversation yet.
Yeah.
Like I said, I can't even imagine being in a situation where I was friends with somebody or my family where I needed their help with something, right? And clearly ask them for that help, right? And they would just say no. Like, I'm not going to do that, right? I really think that I think they would be okay with it. I don't think that it would be a huge issue.
Yeah. Yeah, just ask them, and they'll be fine with it.
Yeah. And once you go to do the process, assuming they say yes, and you take away the food, the toys, and the affection, just do it on muzzle. Keep it short and sweet, and don't step in. Whatever you do not step in unless you absolutely need to, and I would bet you money that it's going to be fine. So that's the key with it. Okay. We're an hour and a half in. We're killing it. All right, we're going to do a little bit more here. This wound up going a little longer than I thought it was going to with the questions, but I do want to get started on this book here. So, like we talked about, transitioning here away from Caesar for a little bit here, and transitioning to somebody who has some similar philosophies, but is much more modern with his training. So this is Love Them by Leading Them, The Good Dog Way by Sean O'Shea. So Sean owns a company called the Good Dog Training and Rehabilitation. They have a location out in Los Angeles, and they have a training location in New Orleans. They're actually closing down their LA location. COVID has been a little rough on them, I think. Also, I think that he just wants to be in New Orleans, and it's been hard to manage two facilities.
True.
I think that's 90% of it for him. So Sean, I discovered pretty early on in my dog training career. Sean, he's been around for quite a while. He was kind of one of the first guys out there putting out a ton of social media content and being really active about what he was doing and stuff like that. And though I don't necessarily agree with a lot of his training methods themselves, I think that some of it is a little more heavy-handed than I would like. There's not a lot of emphasis on teaching and stuff. I think that one thing that he has been wonderful with is preaching the good word of like not babying your dogs, understanding how your interactions with your dog create a lot of problems, things like that, right? And this book came out about 4 years ago. I've had it since when it came out, and he actually just put out a follow-up book to it that I think either just came out or will be coming out within the next couple of weeks, I believe here. So, great book. It essentially is kind of a encompassment of a lot of the blog posts that he used to do. He used to be very active in blogging. So what I want to do is I want to start burning through some of this, talking about some of these concepts, and seeing what we think of it. So we're going to be starting with part 1. He calls it the gap. So this is the 10 out of 10 principle. So what's the number one question we get from owners? When can we pet him? When can we love on him? When can he be on the couch? When can he have total freedom? Okay, that's several questions, but you get the idea, right? When people get dogs, they don't get them thinking they'll have to restrict their affection. They don't think couch privilege might not be on the menu. They don't think they'll have to restrict their dog's ability to roam the house. But if things have gone sideways with their dog's behavior and their relationship with their dog, changing or adjusting those things might just be what's needed to help sort that behavior and relationship stuff out. What many owners don't understand is that these seemingly benign privileges and interactions can create strong feelings and perceptions in our dogs. Feelings and perceptions about us, their owners. Feelings of permissiveness, softness, neediness, feelings that we might just ripe for the taking advantage of. With certain dogs, these interactions and privileges we share can unintentionally convey that listening, respecting, and prioritizing us isn't something they need to worry about. And this can cause lots of problems. It's a good start.
It is.
So just getting into, this is something we talk about a lot, is when people get new dogs, their perception of what that relationship should look like with their dog is usually all of these things. It's the on the couch, the petting, the permissive softness and neediness, and not understanding how a lot of their things that they do in the day-to-day, in this case he used the furniture access and the petting and stuff like that, can contribute to a lot of these problem behaviors. And that if you start having issues with your dog, you may have to take a look at all of those different things. So you may see horrible behavior on walks, territorial stuff around the house or yard, possessiveness, guarding, and neurotic behavior, fighting amongst household dogs, fear, nervousness, or even human aggression. But here's the thing. These privileges and interactions on their own aren't the sole cause of the problems. Actually, they could be almost totally benign. He likes that word. So then what's the problem? The problem arises when these privileges and interactions occur in the absence of their counterbalance, the training, leadership, rules, authority, and accountability. It's when the conversation is completely lopsided that things get funky. Owners don't realize they're having a one-sided, dysfunctional conversation with their dogs that's leading things astray. They don't realize they're giving all the privileges and freedoms and love without asking for anything in return. And when things are given excessively, freely, with no boundaries and no demands for corresponding good behavior, things can get ugly fast. Respect can go out the window, and dogs can get stressed, anxious, nervous, opportunistic, and freaked out. So trainers, looking to shore things up, even things out, and rebalance the human-to-dog conversation, ask owners to remove or reduce certain privileges and interactions. The goal is to shift the way your dog feels about you and your household back to a more healthy space, and thus get your dog himself to shift back to a more healthy space. And usually when things are just beginning, when you're just starting to work on resetting your dog and your relationship, we want to create as much leverage as possible to create the strongest perceptions we can. So we go hard on the changes. Perhaps zero affection, perhaps zero roaming, perhaps zero furniture access, but that's only half of the question. It's not just about what we remove, it's also about what we add that really makes things click. The discipline, the rules, the accountability, the elements that make room for all the fun stuff, the elements that keep the other side of the conversation in balance. But what about those inevitable questions we started out with? When can owners loosen up? When can they have more of the fun stuff? Honestly, it depends on the dog, and it depends on you. It depends on how bad things have been, how out of balance you both are, and perhaps most importantly, what you're capable of sharing in regards to the other side of the conversation, the leadership conversation. All right, let's break some of this down here. So,
it's a lot to unpack right there.
It's a powerful introduction to a book, because this is a lot of it. I mean, you get into the conversation of one-sided relationships, right? We give everything to you, but we ask nothing in return, right? We want to be able to provide all of these fantastic things for our dogs. We want to be able to share all of the fun stuff and go to the breweries and go to the parks and go off leash and go for hikes and for our dog to come everywhere with us. But the thing is, the training and the leadership and the rules is what allows us to do all of that stuff. That is the balance, like we talked about last time. This is where the 10 out of 10 principle, if we are going to be providing 100% love, affection, all of this kind of stuff, we have to provide an equal amount of discipline and rules and boundaries for the dog in order to make sure they stay leveled out. Because no matter what, if we provide too much of one and not enough of the other, we're going to start to create imbalance in our dogs, and a dog that wants to push around more and learn they can get away with things and learn that ultimately this stuff is just, it's going to create a lot of problems with our dog, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is a solid start here. So, and this is where our 10 out of 10 principle comes in. On our scale, if you're a 2 in the leadership rules department, you better be a 2 in the affection freedom department. If you're a 6 in the leadership rules department, then you could be a 6 in the affection freedom department. See how it works? It's just about balancing the conversation, so your dog stays balanced. Your job is to make sure your numbers line up as best as you can. If you're an 8 in affection and freedom and 2 in discipline, you're going to have issues. The truth is, most owners struggle with the discipline side of things. They struggle with the rules, the enforcement, the structure. I've never once in my life needed to tell people, you have to give your dog more pets. You need to cuddle more on the couch with your dog.
Yeah.
You have to give your dog more treats. It's always the other way around. You need to provide more rules. You need to provide more structure, and you need to stop letting your dog walk around you so much or walk over you so much.
That is true.
So keeping an eye on the corresponding freedoms and affection is essential. But the great thing is, if you want more of the fun stuff, you simply need to up your other game. It's not a static thing. Change the leadership number and you'll eventually get to change the freedom number. How much and to what degree depends on you and your dog as individuals, but there's always room for growth. If you'll use the 10 out of 10 scale, honestly, it could help you navigate the tough questions above and help guide you towards a more healthy, rewarding, and ultimately fun relationship. So this moves into what's up for grabs. What's up for grabs? The house, the yard, the other dog, the food, the bone, that spot on the floor, the couch, you. If you don't own your world, there's a good chance your dog will. Territorial issues, dog fights, possessive issues, hyper-proactive, protective issues, not to mention fear, stress, and anxiety problems. Leadership in the form of owning and then sharing your world is the antidote for so many serious behavioral issues. What are you saying? Everything you do, say, ask for, allow, prevent, address, or not is saying something about you and your expectations for your dog and his or her relationship with you. Your actions are always talking and your dog is always listening. What are you allowing? Dogs do what they're allowed to do. It's that simple. If they bark, it's because you allow it. If they jump, it's because you allow it. If they run away, it's because you allow it. If they guard, it's because you allow it. If they fight, it's because you allow it. If they're jealous, it's because you allow it. If they're nasty with other dogs, it's because you allow it. If they're possessive, if they're crazy on walks, if they bark, snap, or growl at people, it's because you allow all of these things. This doesn't mean you've wanted to allow these things. This doesn't mean you've intentionally encouraged them. You probably haven't known how to address or stop them, and that's okay. But understanding the simplicity of how these issues start, continue, and grow is essential to changing them. Once you get that allowing is a necessary component for all of this stuff, you can go after it. Because the only thing you can impact and alter your dog's behavioral issues is you. Your job is to own that and then figure out how to change what you don't want. If you don't want it, don't allow it. Simple and hard all at the same time. So all of these things, if you really break them down that he just discussed above, it's accurate, right? 90% of our behavioral issues with our dogs are owner-induced. And just like he said here, we don't say this stuff to you in a sense of it's your fault. We don't say these to you as far as like, you know, you're screwing up. This is, you know, you should know this stuff. Because frankly, like he said, most owners don't understand a lot of this kind of stuff. And because they don't understand a lot of this kind of stuff, they're not able to really isolate it. But when you break it down, right? Let's use some of these. If they jump, right? If you could isolate, wow, my dog's jumping on people, right? How do I start to stop that? Well, first step is you start becoming aware of all the situations your dog is jumping, and you ask yourself, what am I doing when my dog does this? Am I doing something to encourage it or decourage it? Decourage it? Is that right? Decrease? Whatever.
Yeah, we'll take it.
So dogs can only ever understand one of two things, when we like what they're doing or when we don't like what they're doing. And frankly, anything that we do aside from saying no and providing a consequence is essentially telling the dog we like what they're doing, or we're giving attention to it, which is unintentionally telling the dog we like what they're doing. So if they jump, most people will pet the dog, then push them off, or they'll talk to the dog, or they'll give them a couple quick scratches or something like that. If they run away, most of this comes down to we've allowed the dog to rehearse this thing. Why are they in a position where they're able to run away? Are you letting them off leash too frequently where when you say come, they don't come back? Are you leaving the front door propped open too much, which is allowing the dog to squeeze through and get off? Every time your dog rehearses these things, it's because we put them in a position where they're allowed to rehearse these things. If they guard, how many times do I see people that are like, hey, you know, my dog is having resource guarding issues with toys or furniture or this or that, but they haven't yet taken away those items yet. If you haven't, you're putting the dog in a position where they're going to be able to guard, and you've allowed it. You know, all these other things, the fighting, the issues with other dogs, you know, obviously, unless you're in a position to enforce or fix these things when you start seeing them, you have to first block the pattern of being able to do these types of things. So that's what he's kind of trying to get across by saying some of these things. All right, we're going to skip ahead to one, companionship versus leadership here. In all my days as a trainer, working with over 1,000 dogs, I can count on one hand, actually make that 2 fingers, how many times I've had to coach an owner to be more loving, affectionate, easygoing, and permissive. twice. But I have consistently had to coach folks how to shift gears and adjust to being firmer, sharing more rules, more accountability, and less affection and freedom. Let's connect this with actual parenting. It's easy to be your kid's buddy, to do all the fun stuff, and much harder to be your kid's parent. The parent is the one who isn't always popular and who has to be heavy when necessary. The one who is actually in charge, who's creating rules and boundaries and enforces them because they make for a happier child, adult in the long run. So I'm always reminding folks about leadership, the hard stuff, because companionship, the easy stuff, is, well, easy. Leadership equals comfort. When we know what's expected of us, when we know what the rules are, when we know that consequences are real, when we know someone has been there before, when we know things are predictable, when we know if we get off track, we'll be guided back, when we know there aren't a million options, when we know we're protected, when we know we're safe, we feel comfortable. We crave it, and so do our dogs. Providing leadership, providing rules and expectations creates calmness in dogs. That's how we build confidence, is by taking away their responsibilities and making their lives easier, ultimately. That's why dogs are so carefree, is because we accept that burden, right? And because we accept that burden, our dog doesn't have to worry so much and assume those roles themselves. So all of this, again, we get into, it's all just little segments from his blog. Here's another one. Would you follow you? One of the most important questions we can ask ourselves when working with dogs is, are we someone worth following? Are you consistent and dependable? Do you do what you say? Do you react or respond? Are you overly stressed or anxious? Do you have temper issues? Are you plagued by insecurity? Do you take responsibility or blame others? Are you able to clearly set boundaries and communicate what's okay and what's not? Do you own your space and beliefs? Are you as firm as you are loving? Are you consumed by loneliness and disconnect? Are you someone you're proud of? As valuable as training is for our dogs, making sure we're becoming the very best versions of ourselves, doing our work, is even more important. So before we ask our dogs to follow us, first we have to ask ourselves, would you follow you? And this gets into the conversation again that dog training is human training. I am coaching owners not on what to do, but what they need to be in order to get past some of these issues they're having with their dogs. 9 out of 10 times, we'll see these emotions be conveyed from person to dog over and over again, where if I see somebody that's really wound up and anxious and skittish all the time and stuff like that, their dog typically will reflect or mirror a lot of those different types of behaviors, right?
Yeah. So, I definitely like his correlation of like the parental type feel of leadership. Like, okay, it's nice to be the fun-loving, but you have to have your foot down. You still have to be maybe not the favorite person in the room at the time.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, even looking at this from like a leadership and management standpoint, like with humans, right? So there are times where my staff does not like me. There are times when my managers at the facility will struggle with being too friendly or not friendly enough over certain things, creating conflicted emotions. And unless there's a balance of, you could have the fun and you could let things slide here and there and stuff like that and make sure, everybody is having a good time, but you're also consistent about the rules, you create less kind of conflict and less contrast, right? Mm-hmm. If you're always being the most fun-loving, happy-going kind of person, like at the facility or whatever it may be, and then suddenly you just randomly come in with like laying down the hammer on certain things, that's not going to be beneficial to anybody, because it's going to be this contrast of like, whoa, where did that come from? I don't like that. I don't believe that because I'm not used to having that happen, right? Mm-hmm. And on the contrary, if you're always being super firm and super laying the hammer down on everything, but you're not having enough fun with certain things, and you're not creating a fun, safe, loving environment and stuff like that, they're not going to believe that safe and loving stuff either. So you have to find the balance of all of those things. Yep. It's balance, Josh.
The balance.
It's all balance. So we're going to get through a couple more of these. So next, the power of influence. And this is just we're just a couple pages in. We're just giving a little crash course on kind of what Sean talks about and what he believes. This is a fairly long book that we're going to dive into in depth, probably in the next podcast here. So power of influence. We all become what we surround ourselves with daily. That's why all successful coaches remind us to be acutely aware of who and what we spend our time with, because we become what we expose ourselves to daily. And of course, it's the same with our dogs. Whatever we surround them with daily, they're going to absorb and pick up. Are we stressed, impatient, anxious, fearful, impulsive, manic, always excited, unsure of ourselves, angry, judgmental, worried constantly, always in a rush, needy? All these ways of being will have an impact on the humans in your life and the dogs in your life. But the humans usually have the ability to take a break, take a breather, go for a drive, leave the house, leave the situation, or simply set up boundaries. Dogs are stuck. So what we tend to see in our dogs slowly absorbing and taking on the qualities we share with them daily, like we just talked about, the anxiety, the temper issues, stuff like that. We'll see that all the time from dog to person. Now, this doesn't mean that our dogs will take on carbon copy behaviors of ours. No, they may take on totally different qualities, but they're most definitely affected by what you share. And that's because dogs can't process a lot of the complex emotions that we share with them. So it'll wind up turning into things we wouldn't even imagine. And we're like, where did that come from? As opposed to understanding how some of our behaviors correlate directly to those types of things.
Yep.
The always excited manic owner may create an excited manic dog, or he may create a nervousness, insecure, freaked out dog. It all depends on the dog's personal makeup. And that's because some dogs can't, that excited manic energy for a dog that is like super unbalanced or emotionally unstable can really freak them out, right? That's too much energy and they don't know how to handle it. So they get scared of it as opposed to, kind of amplifying what the dog already is. Mm-hmm. Looking for exact mirror behavior is likely to confuse you because you may see the opposite, but that doesn't mean it's still not the influence in action. The best suggestion is to become aware of your own behavior. Become sensitive to who you are and what you share with the world. With both dogs and people, watch your dog to see if he has become less comfortable, less well-behaved, more neurotic, more troubled. Perhaps more like you, perhaps less. Just know that we can't live with each other day in and day out and not have an impact and influence on each other. We're always impacting and influencing. The question is it positive or negative, or a little of both? P.S. Dogs also come with their own stuff, so your behavior likely isn't the sole cause of whatever issues your dog is sharing. Your job is to be aware and where and when your stuff is becoming your dog's stuff. And that's something I share with clients a lot, is that you have to be aware of how your interactions and the things you're doing are affecting your dog. Every time we look at a behavioral issue a dog is having, I try to ask first and foremost, what am I doing that's possibly reinforcing or creating this? From there, I focus on actually addressing the behavior head on, because one without the other is useless. If I try to correct away a bad behavior, but I'm still doing all the things that created it, you're fighting an uphill battle. All right, last one here. Dogs are smart. They know what works and what doesn't. Have you ever seen a dog try to dig a hole in cement? I don't mean scratch at it momentarily. I mean a concerted, committed, ongoing effort to create a hole in the cement. I know I haven't. So why? It's a perfectly good surface to scratch or dig on, because cement doesn't give at all. And once the dog realizes this, they abandon the dig. It's no fun. It's not getting them anywhere. It's a dead end. What wise and informed insights can we glean from this deep conversation? Simple. Whatever gives will receive continued effort and focus. Whatever doesn't, won't. This goes for straightforward stuff like crates. If you've got a crate breaker, getting a special crate with zero give or reinforcing the one you have is a necessity, all the way to the more nuanced stuff like consistency with rules. If you allow rules to be occasionally flexed, expect them to be flexed often. Dogs are smart. They're looking for stuff that gives in order for them to get more of what they want, whatever they might be. Your job is to be aware of this and make sure that the stuff you're trying to help your dog with, or rules that are important to you, don't give.
It's a pretty good analogy.
It's a very good one. That's why I've seen people fix things like jumping or fix things like digging or barking or crate issues or whatever it may be in a matter of a week, or I've seen people struggle with them literally for the whole first 2 years of the dog's life until they get consistent about these things, right? I know what the rules I have for my dogs are, and I know that I enforce those rules 100% of the time. If Vinny, who is never allowed on the furniture, suddenly starts coming up every now and then for a short little cuddle session, you better believe I'm going to find him on the furniture all the time. So you have to make sure you're following those different types of rules. All right. Quick breather. Okay. All right. We're about 2 hours in here. We're going to end that.
Yeah.
So, again, good book. Just jumping around a little bit here. Kind of another little bit of a random podcast, but diving into questions, diving into some new kind of thoughts and ways to look at some of these behavioral issues. Josh, last notes on anything?
Well, so far, I really, really like that book. No offense to Caesar. I mean, Caesar has really good points and topics. Also, that's the older books that we've been delving into. But this one, I feel like correlates more to.
It's written for the now owners, right? It's written for what people are dealing with now, and it's written in a way where I think people can really soak that information in. And I'm gonna have to when we start reading this next time, kind of slow it down a little bit because they're such short passages. I think that we need to really look at those and understand the actual deeper meaning behind each one, because each one that I'm reading through has a very specific point he's trying to get across.
Yep.
That is very important, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you completely.
I mean, even that introduction was just jam-packed with like stuff. He was just going in immediately.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm really happy that there were so many questions. Like,
yeah.
Thank you guys. Obviously, keep asking us. I mean, that gave us an hour right there, an hour and a half almost, of just answering questions, which is really cool. That means, I mean, people are really seeking the knowledge.
Yep.
So
we are trying to fight the good fight of giving the knowledge. Give me more topics next time to talk about. Questions are great, but if you guys have questions about different dog trainers you're seeing on the internet, or I really liked the ones that Emma asked about, the double down and the kind of agility related stuff and confidence building. All those things are really big. So, yeah, 6 episodes in.
Yeah,
doing it.
I think this was my favorite one so far. Last week's was pretty good, but
Dog Park one's still the best.
Yeah, that one was really good. I guess that's a good thing. See, we've got so much good content.
It's doing good.
Yeah.
All right, Doobie, where are they going to find you?
Josh Dobey Productions on Instagram and my website.
David the Dog Trainer on Instagram. David the Dog Trainer on Facebook. Miracle Canine on Instagram. Miracle Canine Training on Instagram and Facebook. MiracleCanineTraining.com.
So many things.
A lot of links. All right, guys. 2 hours in. We're ending that. We'll see you on episode 7.
See ya.